So over the weeks I've been building my own custom shop Telecaster style guitar, something that I hope will equal the Fender Custom Shop guitars I have here in the studio at a much lower cost and produced using fairly basic tools. So in part one, I took a look at the foundation of any guitar project, the body and the neck, choices available, and the reasons why I made the choices I did. In part two was sealing, priming, first coat net lacquer stage, and Danish oil for the fretboard. It's important to get untreated wood finishes sealed within a short time of purchase due to the risk of moisture ingress, especially in a humid or damp environment. Now in part three was the colour coat, placing decals on the headstock, and final coats of amber lacquer. In part four, I took a look at the accessories, hardware and electrics, along with the process of aging chrome and nickel. In part five, I prepared the headstock, neck and fingerboard for the Relic Custom Shop look, and finishing with a final coat of clear lacquer. In part six, it was time to relic the body, apply conductive paint to the cavities, and a final coat of clear coat lacquer, and set aside to dry out. In part seven, it's time to do a final sand, cut and polish to the neck, drill all the necessary holes, and fit the accessories. Hello viewer, my name's Stu. Please do check out the rest of my channel as it covers my return journey back to playing and recording guitar after a 40-year break. Now a really big thank you to all who have helped this channel recently reach 1,000 subscribers. Now it really helps the channel algorithms by subscribing, clicking the bell for notifications, sharing, giving a thumbs up and commenting below. So a big thank you for taking the time to help out. I really do appreciate that. Now, I'm looking for deserving homes for some guitars that I've been reviewing, particularly with Christmas coming up. So if you've got any ideas, please do message me below, or you can also private message me. Now, a quick note before I begin this particular video. I had intended to be doing the guitar body at the same time as the neck, but in the last video, number 6, where I gave a final clear coat to the body, however, the clear coat lacquer had actually sunk in the areas where I had exposed the wood. Now I had a feeling it was going to do that, and while the end result would still have worked out, it just kind of niggled me. So I gave it 5 days before lightly wet sanding the whole body using 1500 and 2500 grit, and got things looking really nice and smooth. And then I resprayed the body with just 2 coats of clear lacquer in my garage. Now I made sure that I took the cold chill off using an oil heater, and I moved the guitar between coats to a warmish cupboard. And here you can see that it actually looks pretty good all over, but it will still need to be cut and polished to get a better looking finish. So in part 7 of my custom guitar build project video series, coming up. Number 1, it's time to finish the neck and headstock, sand, cut and polish. Number 2, drilling holes and fitting the accessories. And number 3, conclusion, final remarks. So without further ado, number 1. Now if you haven't watched parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and you're thinking about building your own parts caster style guitar, I do encourage you to check out those videos because you should find them helpful. Now for those that are new to relicking and the very different opinions voiced on this topic, do check out this video that I did on my journey series, and you'll find that on that playlist. Now it's been 4 weeks since the guitar neck was spray painted with the final coats of nitrocellulose clear coat lacquer, and the finish is now hard enough for me to sand back. Never make the mistake of sanding nitro lacquers too quickly, especially when they've been done with spray cans, because they really do need time to dry out. Now, nitro never actually cures, but it does become harder as the weeks go on. So to begin, I tape up the rosewood fretboard to keep it safe from sanding and polishing compound debris. Now, on inspection of the lacquer on the headstock, it's actually looking really good. So I'm going to be going easy with the sandpaper before the cut and polish. Now, to begin, I start with the back of the headstock just to get into the way of doing things, so to speak. And here I'm starting with 3000 grit. Now, this is a very light sandpaper, but my lacquer finish is already very flat, which means less work required. I do, however, have little dimples of glossy lacquer showing here and there, so I flat sand the surface further and I switch to a 1500 grit just to even out those small areas. Now, as mentioned before, it's important not to clog the sandpaper when using it dry like this, so I'm continually making sure I don't get any buildup or clogging on the paper. You do go through much more sandpaper this way, but I don't want to use water. That would be the wet and dry method, because I don't want any water going into the tuning peg holes, as this could cause swelling inside those areas. Now, looking at the surfaces in a good light, and once happy that I've removed all the glossy bits, I then move to a 5000 grit, which really does help smooth out any scratches. Now, it's important to be careful of the headstock edging, as the clear coat is not very thick in those areas. And once happy with the finish, I now use a cutting and polishing agent to finish. Now, for this task, I'm using Meguiar's Mirror Glaze Ultra Compound 105 and a set of buffer sponges that attach to my cordless drill. Now, using a little compound spread onto the sponge pad, I buff the headstock surface, moving regularly back and forth. Not too much pressure is required here. Now, once finished and wiping off with a clean cloth, it's time for the Meguiar's Mirror Glaze Ultra Finishing Polish Compound 205, and using a different buffer sponge, I do the same again. Now, after I wipe the residue off, a final buff is done with a soft polishing pad. Now, after inspection in the light, I decide to do another pass of both the Ultra Cut and the finishing polish, and the results are a mirror glaze finish. Now, I'm not actually looking for it to be really perfect, because this is, after all, a relic looking guitar. Confident of what to expect, I do the same treatment for the front of the headstock, and it too ends up looking very nice indeed. I then went on to finish the sides of the headstock, which actually didn't need any sanding, just 2 passes of cut and polish. So now to the back of the neck and the area that's going to be worn down. Taking some 800 grit, wet and dry, and a little of the Ultra Cut compound, I begin to sand down that particular area on the neck where I want to have a well worn in feeling. Now, I'm not looking to cut too deep, otherwise I'll end up taking all the lacquer coats off and exposing the actual maple itself. So I still want a protective lacquer coat, but it needs to have the feeling of virtually no resistance when I run my hand up and down the neck. Just as before, moving on up through the sandpaper grades, I end up at 1500 grit, always moving the paper up and down in the same direction. And I go on to sand the rest of the neck with 1500 grit. Once again, the clear coat finish is very flat, and so that means I don't really have to do that much work. Now, once done and everything has been given a once over, it's time to use the cutting compound and then the polishing compound. Now, having inspected the neck, I'm not really that happy with the feel, so I'm going to take some 800 grit just to knock off those areas I feel that are just not smooth enough. And again, I finish with a cut and polish. So after checking the feel, there's still a little bit of stickiness, so I give the worn neck area a light sanding using 7000 grit and then wipe off with a cloth. And I have to say, now we're really talking. This feels very nice in the hand. Now, unless you do this kind of work regularly, it really is very much a process of working your way through towards what you're specifically after. So number 2, when it comes to drilling holes, care needs to be taken, and always check and double check before commencing to drill a hole. Now, while the body is still drying out and not ready for finishing, it is, however, hard enough to handle, although care still needs to be taken. Starting with the neck, it's placed into the neck pocket, and because it's a perfect tight fit, there's no need to clamp it together. Now, first of all, I drill 4 pilot holes. And then measuring the screw depth and wrapping tape around the drill bit to make sure I don't go beyond that depth, I proceed to drill the 4 neck holes. With the 4 screws in place, I put some candle wax onto the threads, which will help them thread their way into the maple, tightening each screw in increments, moving from screw to screw until nice and tight. Now, I have to say, not over tight. And once done, the neck is removed and it's now time to fit the machine head ferrules. And I'm going to be using a rubber mallet and a small piece of wood to press fit them into position. Now, these are actually quite tight, and sometimes it might be useful to use a reamer to ream out if you need to do that. I'm not having to do that here, and a little help is needed from a pin hammer, but always using the wooden piece to avoid damage to the ferrule edges. Tuning pegs are placed in their correct order, bearing in mind that these are the stepped type. Now, I'm using a straight edge to make sure that they are all in correct line, and then again I'm pilot drilling the holes, followed by actually drilling the correct hole size and depth. Now, the screws are all tightened, and a check to make sure the tuning pegs are turning okay, and they are actually quite stiff, and I'll need to have a wee look at that to loosen them. At the end of the day, it's not really an issue. The 7.5 radius bone nut does require a little bit of work. Here you can see it comes with a little ledge on the inner radius, which is there if you want to use this with a flat radius fretboard. Now, I carefully chip this away with a sharp craft blade and finish with a half round file. Now, the nut slides easily into the nut slot, which is pre-cut on the fretboard, and it just very, very slightly overhangs each side of the fretboard. Not much, but again, this is easily amended using a small file. I'll actually attach the nut to the fretboard with a very light touch of glue once the guitar is complete and given a general setup. But until then, I'm going to be keeping it free in case I need to do any further amendments. So number 3, conclusion, final remarks. Well, in regard to the overall relic look, I'm not going to be lacquer checking the neck or the headstock, because I don't really want to be using a combination of heat and extreme cold on the neck anywhere, and you'll see what I'll be doing when I come to do the body. So in part 8, I'll be finishing the guitar body and drilling all the necessary holes for the various accessories. Finally bringing this guitar together, and I can't wait, and I'm sure some of you can't. Still a couple of weeks before I can do that video. However, a new pedal has just arrived, which is going to replace an existing pedal that I have on my pedal board. I've been having issues with one of my pedals when I use it with my valve amplifiers, regardless if I go straight into the front panel of the amp or if I even try to use the effects loop. I can't seem to resolve the problem, and I've had to replace that. Very nice pedal. More on that next week. Please do think about subscribing. Hit the bell to get notifications for part 8. Like and share, as always. It really does help the channel out. So do check out my channel playlists, which cover my journey back to playing and recording guitar after a 40-year break. And again, there are just lots of equipment reviews as I seek out the gear that I use for recording. So again, if you've got any ideas for me and those guitars that I'd like to see to go to a good home, do message me. So whether you're a newcomer, an ongoing player, or like me, an old hand returning to guitar playing, I always take time to engage with folks who take time to comment. So until next time, the journey continues. You take care.